Welcome to the Legends Behind the Craft podcast, where we feature top leaders in the wine and craft beverage industry with your host, Drew Hendricks. Now, let's get started with the show.
Drew Thomas Hendricks here. I'm the host of the Legends Behind the Craft podcast, where I talk with leaders in the wine and craft beverage industry. Past guests of Legends Behind the Craft include Andrew Means from Transom, Scout Driscoll, founder of Vint, and Jena Bull. Shena's a master in social media strategy for wineries, and she's just about to launch a new social media class. So head over to her site, shenabull.com, for more information. Today's episode is sponsored by Barrels Ahead. Barrels Ahead, we work with you to implement a one-of-a-kind marketing strategy, one that highlights your authenticity, tells your story, and connects you with your ideal customers. In short, we help wineries and craft beverage producers unlock their story to unleash their revenue. Go to barrelsahead.com today to learn more. Today, I've got Bianca Harmon joining us again. Bianca is a direct-to-consumer marketing strategist at Barrels Ahead. If you want to level up your direct-to-consumer game, got to give her a call. How's it going, Bianca?
It's going good, Drew. Thanks for having me on. I'm excited to talk with Jena today and learn about all of the things Jena has her hands in.
Yes, she's got a bunch of things going on. And today's guest is Jena Domingue. She is Senior Vice President at WineDirect, Head of Talent, Culture, and Sales. And Jena's just a master at everything end-to-end D2C solutions, from e-commerce onboarding to last-mile wine delivery. And during Jena's tenure, WineDirect, it's grown from a startup to over $100 million in sales. Welcome to the show, Jena.
Thank you so much, Drew.
Thank you so much for being on. So, Jena, that's quite an impressive tenure at WineDirect. How did you get into this industry?
Thank you. You know, it was almost 10 years ago now as a whole. It's interesting. I started, I was previously in cosmeceutical sales, calling on doctors. And I sort of thought about my future. I thought, what's next? And I said, I'm going to actually decide and choose what my what next is. And I decided I wanted it to be wine. And so I originally started thinking I was going to start my own wine company, and I was going to work.
I have to cut you off. Why wine?
Why wine? Well, being that I was in Northern California, I looked down south and it was all techie. And I thought, there is nothing technical about me. There's no way I'm going to work in tech. And I looked up north and there was wine. And I thought, yeah, wine I can do, right? And so that is how I decided on wine. And then I was going to start my own company. I had a girlfriend who worked at WineDirect, and she said, you should really come meet my CEO and pitch your company idea, and which was Urban Vino, which I know we'll talk about in a bit.
Oh, yeah.
And I went and pitched to my CEO. He said, absolutely, we'd love to back you, but will you come work for me? And I said, well, of course, I'll come work for you. It's a great opportunity to, learn the business and make some great connections. Here I am 9 years later, and it's my story.
Long story short, yeah. And right now at WineDirect, you're head of talent and culture. What does that entail?
So that's essentially our HR department. Although it's, we like to sort of, it's more enriched in that we're doing, of course, the common recruiting and, employee manuals and handbooks and all the things that go with that. But we're also doing things like we've got we oversee the wellness committee. We've got, an engagement, someone who's over that. So we just want to make sure that the life of somebody at WineDirect is very full and engaging, and there's lots of opportunities to grow, whether it's in their career or in the wine industry, or as just as an individual. So it's an all-around sort of encompassing department.
Oh, wow. So that is really, really important. The fact that WineDirect does put so much emphasis on the internal employees' well-being.
Absolutely.
During the 9 years you've been there, how has the culture evolved?
Tremendously. Yeah, I could say that, when I started, sales was a one-man department, support, maybe we had one or two people in support. I think that department is now almost 50 people, across the board of, when you think about, e-commerce for sure, we had maybe one, but now when you think about fulfillment and e-commerce, which, we span, both sectors, we've got almost 50 people supporting our clients, if not more.
Oh, nice.
So it's changed quite a bit. And we are now, while we're still, I say that mom and pop feel, and it's very much, you can walk into the CEO's office or, anyone's office and say hello and have a conversation. I think we've grown up. We're maturing. We're turning into, a company where SOPs matter. KPIs, our measurements, our data, all of those things really have taken center stage.
Especially the SOPs. Like as a company matures, you start with the Wild West, and
Right.
the SOPs are shifting so quickly, you can't really even write them down. You finally know that you've reached that next plateau, or not a plateau, but the next level when you're able to actually codify them a bit.
You got it. That's absolutely where we are. And so, really just defining who we are at the heart of it, which is why we have things like the Wellness Committee. We decided as a company that we really cared about our employees' health and well-being, whether it's mental health, physical health. We just had an amazing walkathon company-wide, and that was fun. It challenged so many people just to get up from behind the desk and walk at lunch, walk the dog on coffee break, and it was just a lot of fun.
Sounds like, and it must be great to be doing a walkathon again, having come out of the pandemic. And I know we've all spent many, many hours talking about it, but from a health and wellness perspective, you're in a unique position to kind of talk to us about how your position kind of evolved through the pandemic and coming out of it. What were some of the things that you learned or implemented that are just going to continue on now that we're kind of moving out of the pandemic?
That's a great question. It starts with the mental health of our employees. Mm-hmm. What happened was, thankfully because of the Napa fires, we had sort of had a couple of fire drills where we had to quickly pivot and get our people working from home, but present and available to all of our winery clients that needed help. And it was tough because oftentimes our own employees were the ones also needing to evacuate, needing services. And so while we were taking care of our employees, we needed our employees to also take care of our clients. And we had to do that, in a pivot without missing a beat. And so we had the couple of fire drills, unfortunately, from the fires. We were sort of used to going home and working. So once we made the decision to go home, we really ran with it. And I immediately rallied the team, and we started doing, things like, let's make sure we have at least a once a week face-to-face. I wanted to make sure I could look at that team, eye to eye. How are you doing? How's your health? Are you staying tuned in? I sent all my managers ring lights just so that they could feel good about getting on camera every day, So we started some, there were just different policies, health policies, caretaking policies that we had to implement. You may not have COVID, but your partner may. How do we, make sure we ensure that you can care for your partner or your children? And so all kinds of policies where we had to really think about what are the needs of our employees and how do we meet those needs so that they can yet be effective for our clients.
Oh, very good. And so going forward, is everybody, are you still remote, or people alternating, or?
Mm-hmm. Of course, our core warehouse staff is, thank God for them. They are in the building every day, all day. Mm-hmm. Our support staff is remote. Mm-hmm. We will return to office. I believe it's June 6th, June 7th, right? Just after the first weekend of June. We are back in office 3 days a week. So we'll go to a hybrid model now.
Yeah, that's what my wife's company did. We've been a fully distributed company since 2014, so it didn't really affect us that much. But no, yeah, my wife's company's gone to a 3-day work week for going forward, or not a 3-day work week. I bet she wishes it was a.
Feels like work week. Yeah, no, we're 5-day work week, 3-day hybrid, and it's kind of use your choice on the days that you'd like to be in office, which is nice. And then maybe we'll have a Teams day where one team is in office this day because they want to have use of the conference rooms and things. But I just think it gets back to building culture. And, and some things that are lost are those hallway conversations.
Yeah.
Sometimes I see it, I'm copied on the thread and it's going back and forth. And I'm like, if one could just walk into the other's office, boy, we could, save a day's worth of emails back and forth. So I do look forward to that. And sometimes you can solve things so quickly when you're just in person and can, walk and talk through it. So I look forward to that.
Yeah. You have to commute though, correct? Because you are in the city, right?
I do. Well, yes. And most of our employees do commute, we've got people in Livermore, we've got people in Sacramento. So another thing that happened in pandemic is people sort of moved away just a bit, but we will continue to, commute back in.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's good. Let's shift the conversation to DTC. All things DTC. So as you over the last 9 years, how have you seen direct consumer sales through WineDirect evolve?
Wow. So when I started, it was early on. I think maybe, there was this 30 some states were approved to ship to, certainly not, we've got majority now, 46, 47 states we can ship to. Things are opening up and they will continue to open up, I do believe, as consumer demand sort of presses on that fence of, they want it now and they want to be able to get it when and where they want it. And they want access to more, So I will say, certainly our clients, our wineries have grown up. When I started, going in and asking someone, hey, what's your digital strategy? They'd look at you like you were, offending them somehow. And so there's certainly been an evolution.
An email address. That's our digital strategy.
Exactly. Yes. So, wineries now understand why it's important to do things like gather email addresses from the folks who are coming. And then how do we get more data, and not intrusive data, but we want to know what's your lifestyle? What do you love? Are you married or single? How do you enjoy your wine? Those are all things that one can contribute to a winery strategy on, their branding, their marketing, who is their target audience. And there's just so many things that we know now about the importance of just gathering that consumer data. And I will say the one thing that, separates DTC from, any other of the channels, 3-tier, anything else is you own your customer, right? Number one, you own the customer, you own your customer data, and you are able to develop a relationship in a way that, Target, Bevmo, no one else can. If they're going to you and buying their wine direct from you, whether it's the tasting room, online, your folks have called them, any direct channel, it's another way to touch that consumer, become a part of their life, understand who they are, and continue developing that relationship. So that's the beauty of DTC.
Yeah.
What is some of your challenges been with dealing with these wineries? Is, Napa is a stickler for thinking that they're Napa and they're always going to be Napa and they're always going to get their people. So how do you guys personally work around and try to bring them on board and try to show them that, the world is changing? And
yes. Well, I can tell you, pandemic did that for us. And those that had a strategy, those that had two things, they had an e-commerce strategy in place, meaning they focused on their website, they had their socials in place, they knew how to engage and talk to their customers and had a message to share, a clear message. And then those that had fulfillment in place, or at least some strategy of how they were going to get their wine to their consumers, they actually did very well. As you know, the wine industry, we thrived, we grew, thank heaven, through pandemic. And so those that had a strategy in place have done really well, and those that didn't scrambled. And so they took probably that, 2019 and part of 20, and we had a rush of people wanting to update their website. Now, of course, everybody wanted it now, at that very moment. And so everybody, I think the big takeaway was have your DT strategies in place. You've got a phenomenal taste room, but it takes, someone to sneeze the wrong way and it's shut down. And so we were, and again, thank God for DTC. And when I look at what our company did to carry, and I can tell you, I've got love letters from clients who said, thank you. You have, through pandemic, we didn't know what we were going to do. Tasting rooms were shut down. We were all frozen in our homes at one point. I think we were frozen in our homes drinking too. And so the wineries were able to really quickly pivot and utilize our services to then shift all of that energy from tasting room or other channels right into their DTC.
That's one of the big strong points of WineDirect is that you do have an end-to-end fulfillment, end-to-end, like 360 degrees is not the right word, but from the start to the finish, you help the wineries
end-to-end solution,
get the product to the customer.
Exactly, which gives us a good understanding of what the needs are, helps us, and takes a lot of the lift away from wineries, so that the burden's not on them to get everything talking and plugged in. And how do I get my compliance to figure out, to talk to my fulfillment center, to send tracking numbers to my customer and then back to my system. And it's all very complicated. And so we really take that big lift and that burden and we shoulder it, and we're happy to do that for our clients.
That's a huge service, especially to a winery with maybe doesn't have the infrastructure to have some of that stuff in house, just to
Absolutely.
be able to provide that.
You are right, Drew. Most wineries, produce 5,000 cases or fewer, 80% of wineries out there. While we have the luxury of these, big, beautiful wineries in Napa, that's not the story for most of the wine industry. And so if we can take a lot of that lift off, yeah, you're right. It makes a big difference.
Absolutely. Now, I don't even have a segue. I want to hear more about this urban vino and this venture that you presented when you were starting it.
Sure. Yeah. So I finally, once we got through pandemic and I had time to think about, okay, what am I doing here? Well, I love and I'm passionate about what I'm doing. I also, I saw, a lot of gaps in the industry that I thought I could maybe help fill. And I've always been one to, when I went to Joe, our CEO, in the beginning, I said, listen, they're African-American vintners. And he said, there are? I go, yeah, and they're your customers too. Who knew? And I said, there are people of color with lots of buying power and no one's really talking to them and no one's connecting the dots, Joe. And so that was really the impetus for starting Urban Vino many, many years ago. And then I said, okay, how can I get back to that? And there are a few key things that, as I observe the market, one sort of easy win was celebrity brands, right? You take someone like, Terrell Owens has his own brand. Let's look at, Charles Woodson, some of the, athletes,
the Currys.
Thank you. The Currys. There's just, this really fun group of athletes or actors that resonate with sort of everybody across the board. And it's really easy to see how they just can easily parlay their way into wine. Whereas somebody, out in Lodi trying to start up their own brand may just struggle a bit, right? It's not so easy to get access to all of these resources. And so we've seen a big sort of influx of just people of color saying, hey, I'm interested. One, I'm a consumer and I'd like to be invited to the party. I always say I always looked at wine as like, there's this really awesome party happening 24/7 in the wine industry, but I'm not sure I'm invited. While I love and enjoy wine, I'm just, I didn't feel like marketing was reflective of all the consumers. Right. And certainly even just going to the tasting room at times could feel that ostracizing. And, I'd be at, maybe a bar or wherever, and they'd invite everyone to the wine club, but not me. And I thought, well, that's odd. I actually would probably join the wine club and I actually have disposable income to spend. And I realized I wasn't alone. And so with that, I sort of came back to my roots, if you will, in getting into wine and said, okay, how do I, now that I have all of this information, all of this knowledge, how can I leverage it and hold the door open for a few other folks who would like to contribute to this party? And also all of the, millions of consumers that come from all sorts of diverse backgrounds that also would like to sort of hear sort of their voices reflected in the wine stories. Sure.
So, do you what is the service that it does?
Okay. So, one is education. So, as you know, I have the Urban Vino podcast, and that's where I was
asking about that.
Yeah. So the podcast really just serves as a point of education and knowledge. So you can come there and, I had the pleasure of interviewing Miss USA 2012, Nana Merriweather, who's got a wonderful wine made from flowers and herbs.
Really?
Yes. I know. It's amazing. And so, just a point of knowledge, right? Where you can come and just go, who's doing what in the industry? We've got celebrities, I've got athletes. And so you can come there and just find out kind of what are the moves that are making from people of color, from women entrepreneurs, and from celebrity wine brands. So that's there. And then if you'll go to the website, just now we're developing a marketplace.
Oh, okay.
Yes, I have to say I'm waving around. My licenses just came in. Hallelujah. So,
that's a relief. You must
so you'll be able to go there and it'll just be I'm going to do a seasonal selection of some really fun wine brands that you can tap into. You might just say, I want a mystery box, surprise me, just send me something good.
Oh, great.
Yeah. And so we'll have about, 20 brands 20 different wines at a time that you can select from, or like I say, do a mystery box. And so that'll change seasonally. You can purchase wine. And then certainly if someone would like to come and say, I've got a wine cellar. Can you help me fill it? We'll have, and then just basic, sort of services. I'm helping a restaurant now select wines for their wine list, and we'll provide wine for them. So I'll be doing some sort of standard services, but collectively, the big idea is Urban Vino House of Brands will exist to pull all these little brands together and leverage our power and go to the marketplace and say, okay, here we've got some very interesting people of color, celebrities, women wine producers. Take your pick. But these are folks who may not have seen the light of day, whether it's in distributorship in 3-tier. They may not have access to world-class DTC services. We've got that for them. So we'll help wine brands themselves grow, and then we'll take them to the market and allow folks to buy and sell there.
Oh, wow. I like the scope. That's great.
Big,
From
we're going to get it done.
Sales to consulting. I love it. Talk to me about, because you're on our podcast. What was it like starting your own podcast?
Scary as hell. I'm somebody who, one, is very private, and secondly, I have a hard time putting myself out there. And you'll probably notice if you go to my socials, it's a little bit dry. I'm working on that and pushing myself. But
I would think the exact opposite about you.
No, yeah, I know.
I would think that you were very in with everything.
Nope. No, I know. I'm so opposite when it comes to my personal life. Anything else, yes. Company bay, anything else, yes. All about it.
Okay.
But if it's me, I tend to just sort of recoil. But I also realize that I'm doing myself and others who can benefit from my story a disservice. And so I've now committed that I am going to start telling my own story. I'm going to hold the door open for others. If you can benefit from my story, or I can give you a piece of advice or experience that I've, by all means, it's yours, and it's free. So I want to make myself more available, and I can't do that if I don't open up, tell my story, and I want to allow others to do the same.
That's so important. I struggled with the same thing. It was anybody that knew me, the fact that I started a podcast 1.5 years ago, they were a bit surprised. But it's so enriching though, having so many conversations. That's what drives me. I always get nervous at the start and the intro, but then once I start the conversation, it becomes very natural. And my wife, when she's working from home, she's like, "You're a different person when you leave the room after a podcast. You're full of energy. She's like, slow down. I'll listen to the podcast. I just want to tell everything that's on it."
I think that's something that we all missed too with the pandemic was it became a channel and an outlet for people to connect in ways that they weren't connecting anymore.
Absolutely.
Myself personally, I enjoy meeting new people. I enjoy talking to new people. I enjoy connecting and learning. And so it's such a high almost to get to sit and conversate with and have an intellectual conversation with and learn.
It really is, Bianca. I 100% agree. And I'm like you, Drew. After the podcast, there's like a zing, right? That's kind of going through you. And I thought that we would be amiss not doing the in-person, interview and face-to-face. But it translates. It definitely, that energy definitely translates, and you're able to connect and I think quickly form a bond with that person. I know for me, and clearly with you, when there's genuine interest, people are willing to open up and really share, right?
They do. What advice would you have? I think it's a great medium for wineries, especially to get their story out. Maybe they may not produce one weekly, but what advice, having just kind of launched yours, would you have for a winery or for someone that a winemaker that wanted to start their own podcast?
The first is just get started.
That's the number one.
Right? I mean, good. Great is the enemy of good is the enemy of great, they say. And I'm someone, I would have waited until I had 10 in the bag and perfected and let's redo this. And what I ended up doing is I actually hired a podcast company to just do everything for me. They laid it out. They helped with my editing, and they were sort of my crutch, and they were my, and literally dragged me by my wrists across the line. Somebody called me. They're like, "Yeah, I was listening to your podcast." I'm like, "No, you weren't." And they said, "No, really, I was." I heard it on Amazon. And I said, what? It's on Amazon? How? I didn't share it. And like, no, it's live. And I called my company, like, yeah, your podcast is live. It's on all the channels. And I was a little shocked, but I was glad that, they're like, Jena, you have content. We're turning it on.
It's out.
And it's out there. And it's like, great, let's get it. And so it was, I personally needed that push. I needed somebody to pull me across the line, or I wouldn't have done it. So I'm so glad that I know me and my walls. And I hired somebody to get me across the line. And it's been wonderful. I needed that.
That's one of the advice I would give too, is find some help and just get it out there. My friend Ian Garlic, he runs Authentic Web and he does Story Cruise, but he has t-shirts made that version done is better than version none. Just
love that.
Get it out there.
Love that. Yes.
You can always make the next version, but I used Rise 25 for our production.
Okay.
And it was the same thing. The first episode, Jeremy, he's like, okay, you're going to be the first guest on your first podcast. I'm like, what? We're recording now? He's like, yep, you're on. We recorded for 15 minutes, and that was the first episode.
There you go.
I had no idea that was what we were going to do in that session, but got the first one done.
Yeah. Yeah. So that my advice would be absolutely do it. People want to hear from you. They're not looking for perfection. They're looking for you.
Mm-hmm.
Right. They just
want authentic version of you.
Yeah, absolutely. And, and if you're looking for me, it's going to be a little messy, you might have heard the dog bark, we're working on all those things, so that there's nice enjoyment, but, you can say, be authentic.
We roll through it. That one of the first ones. I've now figured out a way to pause Zoom calls coming in, but one of my first podcasts, I had somebody called in because all of our corporate lines are on Zoom phone. I had a call come in right when I was doing a podcast, and I was so nervous I didn't know what to do, and I dropped the guest and picked up the call, and it was a dude from India selling me SEO services. Then, in hindsight, I would have merged the two calls and would have said, "Hey, you're on a podcast right now. You're with." But I didn't learn how to run.
True. I'm yes, and I'm laughing because that twice that's happened to me where so you heard when I came on, like, let me put on my do not disturb. I've figured out these are some small things that just help you really along the way.
Yeah. I still think about that one. So the people can find the podcast at Urban Vino. They just look for it on iPod,
Apple, Amazon, yes, all the platforms.
Oh, that's great. And I got to check that one out.
So how are you finding your guests, Jena, to bring on to what is the guest that you're looking for the podcast? Who is the criteria that you're trying to fit for that?
Sure. So, for my own comfort, I've started with people that I kind of know. So a good friend of mine was Anani Lawson. He's a sommelier, and he's, French laundry per se, just, well established, but also a good friend. And so I had a comfort level with him. And so he was one of my first podcasts. But, really, it's just reaching out to, I now have a target list of people that I'd love to have on. But anytime I have an introduction to some that I think I'm like, hey, do you want to come on my podcast? So I had Greg Vaughn on yesterday, who I think we talked about him. He's an MLB, 4-time All-Star, has his own wine now, really committed to giving back to his community. So I look for people who, one, have a story. You don't have to have a wine, but maybe something in the wine industry, or it could be spirits as well. My key, I always say rare and boutique wine brands brought to you by winemakers of color, women wine entrepreneurs, and celebrity wine brands. So that's a pretty big span, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Lots of stories.
That's going to keep you busy for a while.
Yeah. And I've got a commitment from some really A-list people. So I'm, I'm kind of tempering it, and I'm, polishing my act up a little bit, but we're going to have some really fun people coming on pretty soon.
Oh, I can't wait to listen.
Yeah.
So you recently became a brand ambassador for Liquid Icons.
Mm-hmm.
Talk to me about that. This was new to me. Researching for the show is the first time I've kind of come across it.
Yeah, it's a newer organization. They really sort of came to light last year with their first big sort of soiree in London. This year it'll be in Tuscany, Italy. But really, they bring together. I mean, if you look at the sponsor list alone, Rolls-Royce, Gucci, San Pellegrino, a lot of the LVMH brands and Moet Hennessy portfolio. Some amazing sponsors, but they've come together it's just interesting how it all worked out. While you have these amazing luxury brands, which is something that I pretty much just, really ascribe to, and probably more of my aesthetic. But you've got these phenomenal world-class brands who come together. There's an auction, an extravagant wine auction, with just Romani, Conti, just some brands breathtaking brands from US and around the world. And there's an auction, they raise the money, and all the money goes to scholarships and internships to create diversity and inclusion in wine, spirits, and hospitality.
Oh, wow.
Right in line with just my own core mission. And I just happened to, somehow I found them on, LinkedIn, and I emailed Lewis and I said, "Hey, Lewis, I'm interested in what you're doing." We had a Zoom call just like this, and we talked, just had a great conversation, and was invited to be ambassador. So it is truly an honor, one, to work with just, again, world-class wineries, world-class brands, and then to bring all of that right on home, to be able to offer scholarships to folks who are here. It's education. And another big scholarship is around MWMS. So those pursuing their advanced degrees in wine. But as you know, kind of when you hit, mid-career and your stride, you're working. Mm-hmm. And it's very hard to pull back and, circle and take time for your education. So there's a very lucrative, scholarship there where they'll help fund you for the year and really push you to that next level. If you're interested in spirits and distilled spirits, there's an on-hand, 12-month scholarship and internship with Hennessy.
Oh, wow. So
just some really interesting opportunities, and more are coming on board. We even just introduced one that is for displaced sort of folks who have been displaced by, let's say, war, hence what's happening in the Ukraine, or other places around the world. But you yet have to want to pursue your career in hospitality, wine, spirits. We've got a scholarship to fund them as well.
Oh, well, how do people, what's the criteria for these scholarships?
Really, we just want to know, what are you working on now? Show us a bit about your body of work. The application is not really long or intensive. You can sit and go through it, complete it in probably 30 minutes. If you want to go back and refine it another day, just to add, we're looking for, show us your certain qualifications or certifications, your body of work. But we really want to know who you are. Tell us about your story, why you're doing what you're doing, what are your plans, how do you want to expand, and how are you bringing education to the world. So it's not, hugely daunting to get funding, but you certainly can go to liquidicons.com. You'll see the Gerard Bassett scholarship, funds there. Just click and read through them and see if there's something that works for, anyone who's interested.
What a great cause, and what a great resource people would have, especially studying for the Masters of Wine is such an intense exam, and it's kind of hard to, any help you can get to.
You need support. Yeah.
Yeah. So so for the Liquid Icons, you've got the scholarships, and then you've got the education. Tell me a little bit more about the education part of it.
Well, we work with, I don't want to say it wrong, so I'm going to tell you exactly the organization, because I should know, and I have it here. I'm going to tell you exactly, but we work with world-class organization to one, OIV, and they really give just data about what's happening in viticulture around the world. Mm-hmm. And so we work with them to look at what's happening with the environment. And there's a wonderful report that we produced. I think, and we may talk a little bit earlier about this. So there's an annual report that comes out, and we're talking about, what's happening in wine, what are some of the trends, and we gather this from tapping into the top wine, for anybody who's working in wine. Mm-hmm. We want your feedback. We want your input. And so there's a series of questions that we'll go through. And then there's a report that is produced every year. And again, if you go to liquidicons.com, you see that the first thing you see is the report, the annual report that's produced. Really important. And I would encourage anyone, the survey is still open. So if you are in wine, and if you don't mind, we can provide the link. Anybody can go there, and we'd love for you to vote and give us your feedback on your favorite wines, your favorite wineries. And then, of course, other things that are impacting the wine industry. Is it, environmental impact? So all sorts of different criteria. And so that report is going to, the more participants we have, the more robust the report is. And so that's just another piece of really giving insight into what's happening in wine. And that's one thing I've found even at WineDirect is we've got a ton of information, but it's typically kept to us. Mm-hmm. And we haven't always shared that. So you'll see also, this year WineDirect did an impact report just to shed light on, what's happening in the world of wine. So we want to make sure education, information is getting out there so that people can make informed decisions as, from a B2B perspective.
For those of us that have not read the report or probably too lazy to read it, what are some of the biggest points that stood out during the last report?
For WineDirect?
Either one, either of the reports.
I can tell you, certainly for WineDirect, we did a big focus on what are the shifts that have happened, especially from 2019 to 2021. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, it's a 5-year, look back at data. But in particular, what are some of the trends that we're seeing? Some of the things that we found, are how important clubs are to wineries. And we're still seeing, and that's very firm. We're seeing a firm hold in clubs, thank goodness, not, cancellate. That's not softening yet. Some of our daily orders perhaps are trickling off and falling back. We, and we obviously can account that to a few things. The world has opened up. People are now perhaps maybe back in the office and not so much day drinking. People are now on weekends and evenings going out to dinner more than they would have, let's say, a year ago. And so just looking at some trends, average, you can go there and look at, average order value, increase, decrease, all sorts, just rich information about end-to-end DTC.
Yeah, just to help you make better decisions on where to put your marketing capital and how to structure your clubs.
It's so true. And then we actually, at the very end of it, we kind of highlight what our findings are. And then we highlight here, 10 key things you can do based on these findings that you can implement into your own wine business. And so while it's an informational and impact report, we also give you some nice key takeaways that you can, you go, great, what's all this data telling me? Well, we're connecting the dots for you. And we actually give you some nice takeaways that a winery can use to, shore up your business, things like, and looking at trends, there'll be a trend towards marketing towards women, marketing towards younger people, things like that.
That is what so many reports lack, is actionable insight. You're like, wow, those graphs look great. I see some are going up, some are going down.
And now what? What do I do with all this? Right. Yeah.
So where can people find that report?
You can go to winedirect.com. It's probably going to be under resources, but let's make sure we provide a link to that report and they can download it. I want to say it's typically under our resources tab, but I want to make sure I give it really clear and, I don't want anybody fishing for it. So we'll just give a link to it.
We'll make sure we have that in the show notes.
Okay, for sure.
It comes out. So Jena, as we're kind of wrapping down, is there anything we haven't talked about that you want to talk to us about, or anything I can ask you?
I think those are the major points. I would say, I think going back to sort of probably my core, values and what drives me is it's creating this wonderful world of diversity. Urban Vino, our sort of tagline is highly exclusive, always inclusive.
I like that. I really like that. And now I do also ask this all the time. Now, when you're out and about, what do you like to drink?
Cocktails. No.
What's your favorite cocktail?
I do. I enjoy a good cocktail. Let me tell you.
I do too.
But if my wine of choice, I always, go towards my reds. But my daughter's like, Mom, let's go back. I've been enjoying whites lately. Do love a good Sancerre. You can't go wrong with a sparkling. I don't care if it's Cava, Prosecco, Champagne, you name it. I'm a sparkling girl. So love those. I think, my favorite though, I will say, if I can find a really good Lambrusco or a sparkling Gamay or some sparkling red.
I was just going to say one of my favorites is sparkling Grenache. I love it.
Right? Yeah, there's something so.
There's actually a
magical
great
about
place in Healdsburg. Have you been? It's called Williamson Wines.
No.
And they do a sparkling Syrah too, and a sparkling Malbec.
Really?
Oh
Okay.
yeah. My brother's a wine club member there. So that's how I get to try all these fun, but they are fantastic if you're into some of those style.
I'm on it. Thank you for that tip. Yeah.
Check them out. They're great.
Yeah, there's something magical about a sparkling red wine, I tell you. So that's my favorite. But I really, I'm very versatile. But Syrah, if you ask me my favorite varietal, it would be a Syrah or like a red blend, so something kind of red and juicy.
Definitely need to try the sparkling Syrah.
Okay.
Yeah. I think we should call it out on this show that the sparkling red's going to be the new big category going forward.
Done. I'm in Vegas. I'll double down on it.
Sounds good. So Jena, where can people find out more about you?
So of course, I have, we can go to Liquid Icons. I'm there listed on the team, and there's a nice bio. You can always go to, my podcast. There's actually a couple of my first podcasts were really just about me with my podcast producer. And so you can there, but certainly I would say if you want to really keep up to date, follow the podcast, because I'll be sharing some of my own personal journey there. I am on Instagram. There's Urban Vino. I'm getting better about posting there, but I would say the most accurate place and up to date would be just follow the podcast.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Well, Jena, thank you so much for joining us today.
Happy to. And certainly if there's anything, if I can be of a resource to anyone on the DTC front, WineDirect is my first last, Jena Domingue at winedirect.com. You can always reach me there. Happy to engage around, all things DTC, fulfillment, e-com. You let me know and we'll get you plugged in with the right people.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Bianca. Thank you, Drew.
Thanks for listening to the Legends Behind the Craft podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.